Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be replacing the screen on my Lenovo Legion Y530 laptop. This is something I'd been meaning to do for a while since there are several reasons why I wasn't happy with the panel it shipped with. But a slight accident with a bottle of isopropyl alcohol meant that I ended up doing it sooner than expected. When looking for a new screen, there are several different models listed in Lenovo's service manual. First, there's the LG LP156WF9 SPK1, which has 250 CDM brightness, 262,000 colors and can display 47% of the NTSC color gamut. Another LG model is the LP156WFC SPD1 with 223 CDM brightness, 262,000 colors and 54% of the NTSC color gamut. This is the screen that shipped in my Y530 and it suffers badly from image retention as well as poor brightness. Next, the BOE NV156FHM N48 with 250 CDM brightness, 262,000 colors and 45% of the NTSC color gamut. And there's also the Innolux N156HCE EN1 with 300 CDM brightness, 16.7 million colors and 72% of the NTSC color gamut. I'll put links to these panels along with the tools I used down in the video description below. When looking at these specs, it's fairly easy to see that the Innolux panel is the one to get, if you can find it. It's significantly brighter than the other screens and has a higher bit depth, enabling more colors and higher color accuracy. All of the screens here are 60Hz panels. You're probably aware that some models of the Y530 shipped with a high refresh rate 144Hz panel. However, you can't upgrade a machine that shipped with the 60Hz panel to the 144Hz panel, since the higher refresh rate panels use a 40-pin 4-lanes EDP connector instead of the 30-pin 2-lane EDP connector on the 60Hz screens. Now on to actually replacing the screen. A word of warning before starting this. Lenovo use a lot of adhesive, both to secure the bezel to the LCD panel and to secure the LCD panel itself in the case lid. So it's very difficult to remove the existing screen without breaking it. So this is only something I'd recommend you do if your screen is currently broken or if you're okay with the possibility of breaking it during the process. First, turn the laptop off, place it face down and remove 11 screws from the bottom case. There are 5 long screws marked by the red circles and 6 short screws marked by the blue circles. They can be removed using a size 0 or 00 crosshead screwdriver. With the screws removed, the bottom case is still held on by a series of clips. Turn the laptop onto its edge and bend out the lower case a little to create a gap. Insert something plastic in this gap and work it round the edge of the case, rotating it away from you to undo the clips. Once the clips on the sides and front have been undone, you can rotate the bottom case towards the back and lift it off. Now, before beginning work on the screen, you need to disconnect the battery. Since there's very little space around the battery connector in this model, it's easier to remove the battery first. This gives you more room to maneuver the cable and disconnect it. To remove the battery, there are 4 crosshead screws indicated by the red circles. Once the screws have been removed, the battery can be lifted up and the connector pulled straight out from the socket on the motherboard. With the battery out of the way, it's safe to begin working on the screen. First, we need to remove the bezel. The easiest way I found to do this was to insert my fingers into the gap between the bezel and the LCD at the bottom where it's thickest, then pull straight up to disconnect the clips. This is a little bit more difficult as there's double-sided tape holding the bezel to the LCD as well as the clips. Once the clips at the bottom are undone, you can continue working your way around the edges and the top, pulling the bezel straight up away from the screen. Be very careful when doing this, as the bezel is quite thin, so it's easily broken. Once the bezel has been removed, it's time to remove the LCD. It's held in place by two thick adhesive strips either side, indicated by the red bars. Once the screen has been separated from the back of the lid, remove any remaining tape from the back of the LCD and lay the LCD face down on the keyboard while you disconnect the cable. Peel up the clear tape covering the LCD connector, then use something plastic to flip up the metal retaining lever and rotate it back. The connector can then be pulled straight back out of the socket. Now it's time to install the new screen. I picked up a new LCD on eBay for around €60 with shipping. However, as usual with eBay, although I bought the inner look screen, they sent me a completely different one. So what actually arrived was the BOE screen. Although it's better than the screen I had before, since it doesn't suffer from the image retention issues that the LG screens have, it's nowhere near as good as the Innolux panel. So that's the one I'd recommend if you can find it. Place the new screen face down on the keyboard and then slide the LCD connector straight into the socket. You can then rotate the metal retaining lever down to secure it in place, and replace the tape over the top of the connector, or add a new piece of tape if needed. Some of the double-sided tape that secured the panel in the back of the lid had been damaged when I removed the old panel. Since I didn't have any suitable new tape to replace it, I just cut out the damaged portion with a blade, and the remainder was enough to hold the screen in place until the bezel went back on. The new screen can be rotated backwards into the lid, making sure not to trap the cable, and then you can press down gently on each side where the adhesive is. Now, before replacing the bezel, I wanted to check that the new screen was working. After plugging in the power cable and turning the laptop on, I could see the Lenovo logo, and after booting into macOS and checking that the brightness controls were working, I was satisfied that the screen was fine. All that was needed to do now before replacing the bezel was to remove the protective plastic from the new screen. The adhesive securing the bezel to the LCD was 2mm wide double-sided black tape. I'll link to some suitable replacement tape down in the video description. This can be placed around the edge of the LCD panel before replacing the bezel. To replace the bezel, place it over the screen and press down firmly but gently along each of the edges to reattach the clips. Run your finger along the bottom bezel, feeling for any lumps which might indicate a clip that's undone, and then push down firmly to reattach it. I then gave the screen a wipe with a lens cloth to remove the fingerprints that had got on there while replacing the bezel. All that's left to do now is to replace the battery. Lower the battery back into place, sliding the connector back into its socket at the same time. You can then use a plastic tool to push the connector firmly back into its socket. Don't use anything made of metal for this, as you run the risk of causing a short. Once the connector is back in place, you can replace the 4 screws securing the battery. With the battery screws replaced, the lower case can be put back on. Press down firmly along each edge until you hear the clicks as the clips reattach. Finally, you can replace the 11 screws in the lower case. that you removed at the beginning. Overall, I was quite happy with the new screen. It was certainly an improvement over the old one, but after using it for a while I noticed the stuck pixel in the bottom left corner. However, it slowly faded over time, and after about 10 minutes it was completely gone. This upgrade took about an hour to complete from start to finish. That's it for this video, thanks for watching.